I am Rachel, 27 years old, and grew up as the forgotten child in my family. My older brother Jason was the golden boy who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. For years, I endured neglect and psychological abuse from not just him, but my parents who enabled his behavior. At 20, I finally gathered the courage to run away and build a life of my own. Now, 7 years later, they've reached out wanting something from me that I never expected. If you're watching this, let me know where you're viewing from, hit that like and subscribe button, and prepare yourself for a story about finding strength when your own family fails you. I grew up in a seemingly picture-perfect middle-class suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania. Our house was the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and holiday decorations that neighbors complimented. From the outside, we looked like the ideal American family, but behind closed doors, things were very different. My father, Thomas, worked as an accountant at a prestigious firm in the city. He was always impeccably dressed in tailored suits with not a hair out of place. People respected him for his intelligence and attention to detail traits he expected to see reflected in his children. My mother, Eleanor, taught English at the local high school. Her students adored her passion for literature and her nurturing teaching style. Unfortunately, that nurture rarely extended to me at home. Then there was my brother Jason, 3 years older than me, and the undisputed star of our family. From an early age, Jason showed promise in everything he touched. At 7, he won the regional spelling bee, leaving my parents beaming with pride for weeks. By 10, his science fair projects were advancing to state-level competitions. In high school, he became the football team quarterback, bringing home trophies that my father proudly displayed in a special cabinet in our living room. I actually have some precious memories from when we were very young. When I was 3 and Jason was 6, we would build blanket forts in the living room and pretend we were exploring uncharted worlds. He would make up elaborate stories and include me as his brave sidekick. Those were perhaps the only times I felt truly connected to him before he realized that focusing on himself alone would yield greater rewards from our parents. The shift happened gradually but unmistakably. Christmas when I was 5 marked the first time I noticed something was off. Jason received a brand new bicycle with all the accessories while I got a coloring book and some crayons. I told myself it was because he was older, but the pattern continued. His bedroom was twice the size of mine, decorated exactly as he wanted with a computer, television, and gaming system. My room remained basic with furniture from yard sales. When Jason outgrew his clothes, he got new ones. I got his hand-me-downs that never quite fit right, despite being different genders. Desperate for some parental attention, I threw myself into art and music. By 9, I could play several complex pieces on the piano, and my art teacher suggested entering my paintings in youth competitions. When I brought home certificates for these achievements, my mother would smile briefly and say, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to helping Jason with his homework or preparing his favorite dinner. My father was even more dismissive, referring to my creative pursuits as cute little hobbies, while introducing Jason to his colleagues as the future valedictorian. I remember feeling confused about the difference in how we were treated. I would lie awake at night wondering what was wrong with me, what I had done to make my parents love me less. Children naturally assume they are at fault when adults mistreat them, and I was no exception. I thought if I just tried harder, was quieter, or somehow became more like Jason, they would love me equally. One memory stands out painfully clear. My 8th birthday fell during the same week as one of Jason's football victories. My parents forgot to order a cake for my birthday. We ended up with grocery store cupcakes that my mother hastily purchased that morning. 3 days later, Jason's team celebration featured a custom cake in the shape of a football field, with his jersey number prominently displayed. My parents spent hundreds of dollars on food and decorations, inviting the entire team and their families to our backyard. I was told to stay upstairs during most of the party because they needed the space for important guests. That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching the small stuffed animal my school friend had given me, the only real birthday gift I had received. It was then that I first understood with painful clarity that in our family there was Jason, my parents, and then somewhere far below, there was me. This realization would only become more pronounced and painful as the years went on, but even at 8, I knew something was fundamentally wrong with my family. The dynamic shifted dramatically when Jason entered middle school. What had been passive favoritism transformed into active hostility toward me. It was as if once he became a teenager, he realized the power he held in our family and decided to weaponize it against me. When I was 10 and Jason 13, I started keeping a diary where I wrote about my feelings of being overlooked and my small daily accomplishments that no one else seemed to notice. One afternoon, I came home from school to find Jason and his friends in our living room laughing hysterically. To my horror, Jason was reading aloud from my diary, putting on a mocking voice and adding cruel commentary. His friends howled with laughter at my private thoughts and dreams. When I ran to grab my diary, tears streaming down my face, Jason held it above my head where I couldn't reach. "What are you going to do about it? Cry to Mom and Dad like they'd ever believe you over me," he taunted. When I did try to tell my parents that evening, my mother sighed wearily and said, "Rachel, stop trying to get your brother in trouble. He is under a lot of pressure with his advanced classes and football training. He is just being a normal boy." That became the refrain I heard repeatedly over the years. Jason was just being a boy, while I was too sensitive, or making things up for attention. The reality was that Jason had mastered a dangerous skill. He presented himself as the perfect son when our parents were watching, but became my tormentor when we were alone. In 7th grade, I spent weeks working on an art project for the school show. It was a mixed media landscape that my teacher said showed real promise. The night before it was due, I went to bed early, excited to bring it to school the next day. When I woke up, I found my project destroyed. Paint smeared across the carefully crafted elements, pieces torn and scattered. Jason was sitting at the breakfast table with an innocent expression when I ran downstairs sobbing. "What happened now?" my father asked with irritation. When I explained about my ruined project, Jason feigned sympathy while my parents exchanged knowing looks. "Rachel, you probably left it somewhere you shouldn't have," my mother suggested. "Or maybe you realized it wasn't as good as you thought and you're embarrassed," my father added. "You need to be more organized and take responsibility instead of always blaming your brother." I missed school that day, too upset to face my teacher empty-handed. Meanwhile, Jason received praise for getting an A on his history test. That evening, I heard him chuckling to himself in his room as he texted his friends. By the time I was 14, I had started working weekends at a local ice cream shop, saving every dollar I earned in a small box hidden in my closet. I dreamed of eventually saving enough to take art classes that my parents refused to pay for. After 6 months of work, I had saved nearly $400, a fortune to me at that age. One Friday, I came home to find my savings box empty. I knew immediately what had happened, but still held on to a thin thread of hope that perhaps my mother had moved it while cleaning. That hope was crushed when I saw Jason wearing a new leather jacket that weekend. When confronted, he smirked and said I couldn't prove anything. "I probably spent it and forgot," my mother suggested when I tearfully told her about my missing money. "You have always been absent-minded, Rachel." "Or she is lying to get Jason in trouble again," my father added sharply. Jason earned that jacket through his academic excellence. My mental health began to deteriorate noticeably. I developed severe anxiety, jumping at small noises and having trouble sleeping. My grades dropped as I struggled to concentrate in school. A particularly observant school counselor, Ms. Parker, called me into her office one day after noticing the change. "Rachel, is everything okay at home?" she asked gently. I wanted desperately to tell her everything to have an adult finally believe me, but years of conditioning made me afraid. What if she called my parents? What if it made things worse? What if she didn't believe me either? "Everything's fine." I lied, staring at the floor. "I'm just tired from studying." Meanwhile, Jason was thriving in high school. He became class president, maintained a perfect GPA, and led the football team to regional championships. At home, he controlled the narrative about me completely. If I received a B on an assignment, he would casually mention how I never applied myself. If I made a small mistake, like forgetting to take out the trash, he would sigh dramatically and say something like, "This is why we can't rely on Rachel for anything important." Our parents absorbed and amplified these messages. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my teenage years. As Jason's accomplishments grew, so did the emotional chasm between me and the rest of my family. I began to understand that there was no winning this game, and my thoughts increasingly turned to escape. I just needed to survive long enough to find a way out. By the time I entered high school, I had perfected the art of emotional retreat. I built walls around myself so high that neither Jason's taunts nor my parents' dismissiveness could penetrate quite as deeply. I found refuge in two places: my art and a small group of loyal friends who valued me for who I actually was. My high school was large enough that I rarely had to interact with Jason, who was a senior when I was a freshman, but home remained a battleground where I was always outmatched. Jason had become not just my parents' favorite, but the center of their entire emotional universe. Every dinner conversation revolved around his college applications, his football scholarship prospects, or his latest academic award. I learned to make myself invisible at home, eating quickly and retreating to my room to draw or study. When forced to participate in family activities, I would put on a mask of polite disinterest, having learned that showing any emotion, positive or negative, could become ammunition for Jason. The summer before Jason's freshman year of college, he crashed our family car while driving home intoxicated from a party. Rather than face consequences, my parents orchestrated an elaborate cover-up. I overheard them discussing how to handle the situation with my father, saying, "We can't let this impact his scholarship. We will say a deer jumped in front of the car." I watched in disbelief as they filed a false insurance claim and repeatedly rehearsed the deer story with Jason. When I quietly suggested that maybe Jason should take responsibility for his actions, my mother turned on me with unexpected fury. "How dare you try to ruin your brother's future?" she hissed. "This stays in the family, do you understand me?" That incident shattered any remaining illusion I had about my family's moral compass. The rules simply didn't apply to Jason, and protecting him would always take precedence over truth, fairness, or my well-being. One unexpected bright spot emerged during my sophomore year when I took an advanced art class with Mrs. Sanderson. Unlike my parents, she saw genuine talent in my work and took me under her wing. She stayed after school to teach me new techniques and introduced me to different artistic styles. More importantly, she listened when I talked and valued my perspectives. "Rachel, have you considered applying to art schools?" she asked one afternoon as I was working on a portrait. I shook my head sadly. My parents would never support that. They think art is just a hobby. "With your talent, you could qualify for scholarships," she continued, showing me brochures for several prestigious programs. "You don't need their permission to apply, you know." That conversation planted a seed. What if I could find a way out through my art? What if there was a future where I could be valued for being me? I began secretly researching art schools, focusing on programs far from Pennsylvania. I stayed late at school to work on my portfolio and used Mrs. Sanderson's classroom computer to submit applications, since I knew my parents monitored our home internet. My plan was progressing well until Jason came home for winter break during his sophomore year of college. While using the family computer, he discovered browser history I had failed to clear completely, showing college application websites. "Planning your escape, little sister?" he asked with a dangerous smile. "It would be a shame if your applications mysteriously got withdrawn, or if your portfolio went missing." The threat was clear, and I knew he was capable of following through. That night, I moved my portfolio to Mrs. Sanderson's classroom for safekeeping and changed all my passwords. But the anxiety of being discovered heightened my already significant depression. While Jason was being celebrated for his college achievements, my own mental health was crumbling. I began having panic attacks before going home each day. I lost weight as my appetite diminished, and dark circles formed under my eyes from insomnia. Yet my suffering remained largely invisible to my parents, who were wholly focused on Jason's rising star. My 18th birthday passed with barely a mention. My mother remembered to pick up a small cake from the grocery store, but the evening was dominated by excitement over Jason's summer internship at a prestigious financial firm. As my father raised a toast to Jason's bright future, I sat silently wondering if they would even notice if I disappeared. My graduation day should have been a celebration of my achievements despite the obstacles. Against all odds, I had maintained a strong academic record and been accepted to several art programs with scholarship offers. But as we sat in the auditorium waiting for names to be called, my parents chatted excitedly about Jason's Dean's List status and barely acknowledged the ceremony happening before them. When my name was called, I heard a faint clap from my mother while my father was checking his phone. As I walked across the stage clutching my diploma, I looked out at the crowd and saw Mrs. Sanderson giving me a standing ovation. That single gesture of recognition meant more to me than a lifetime of my parents' half-hearted acknowledgments. It strengthened my resolve to find freedom no matter what it took. After graduation, I made the difficult decision to delay college. While I had received several scholarship offers, none covered the full cost, and I needed time to save money independently. I took a job at a local coffee shop, working early mornings before my parents woke and saving every penny I could. I told my parents I was taking time to figure things out, and for once, they didn't pressure me, likely relieved that they could focus exclusively on Jason's college achievements without distraction. I rented a small lockbox at the local bank where I stored my savings, knowing they would be safe from Jason's sticky fingers. By living minimally and working extra shifts whenever possible, I managed to save a surprising amount. My plan was taking shape, but I needed at least another 6 months before I would have enough to make a clean break. Jason was now in his junior year of college, studying finance and frequently returning home on weekends. Each visit was a fresh torment, as he had somehow grown even more arrogant with distance. He would arrive home to heroes' welcomes, my parents fawning over him and preparing elaborate meals. Then, when they stepped out, he would turn to me with contemptuous smiles. "Still here, Rachel? Still the family disappointment?" he would ask, knowing I wouldn't fight back with our parents around. I maintained my invisibility strategy, trying to work shifts during his visits and staying with friends when possible. But one weekend in February, everything changed. I received a letter from a credit card company thanking me for my application and informing me of my approval. The problem was, I had never applied for this credit card. After some investigation and several panicked phone calls, I discovered that 3 credit cards had been opened in my name, all maxed out with charges totaling over $10,000. The evidence pointed clearly to Jason, who had access to my social security number and other personal information. With documentation in hand, I approached my parents one evening after dinner. I carefully laid out the evidence, including statements showing purchases in the college town where Jason lived during times I was working shifts in our hometown. "I need your help addressing this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is identity theft, and it has seriously damaged my credit score." I watched as my father's face turned red, but not with anger at Jason. His fury was directed at me. "How dare you accuse your brother of being a criminal?" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "He is building a future in finance. He would never jeopardize that with something so stupid." My mother's reaction was equally dismissive, but wrapped in a veneer of concern. "Rachel, sweetie, are you sure you didn't apply for these cards yourself? You have been under a lot of pressure lately. Maybe you did this and forgot, or maybe you are trying to blame Jason because you are jealous of his success." "Why would I max out credit cards in my own name and then report it?" I asked incredulously. My father's next suggestion left me breathless with shock. "Maybe you are trying to get money from us, or attention. You have always been dramatic, Rachel." As they continued to defend Jason and question my sanity, I felt something break inside me. The last tiny thread of hope that they might ever see me, hear me, or protect me snapped completely. I spent the next week trying to resolve the credit issues on my own, making police reports and disputing the charges. I was partially successful, but knew my credit would be damaged for years to come. I adjusted my escape plan accordingly, knowing I would need to rely on cash for the foreseeable future. Then came the final betrayal, the one that would push me past my breaking point. One evening in late March, I was heading to my room when I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in their bedroom. Normally, I would have kept walking, but I heard my name mentioned and paused. "What about Rachel's college fund?" my father was saying. "We promised that money to her." My heart lifted momentarily at this acknowledgement, only to be crushed by my mother's response. She isn't even applying to real colleges right now, she said dismissively. And Jason needs a reliable car for his new internship position. That fund would cover a nice used vehicle that would make a good impression at the firm. You are right, my father agreed after a moment of consideration. Jason will make better use of that money. His career is taking off and he needs our support now. Rachel can apply for student loans later if she ever gets serious about a real career. I stood frozen in the hallway, a strange calm washing over me. The college fund they had promised me throughout my childhood, the one thing I had been counting on to eventually pursue my education, was being handed to Jason without a second thought. I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, looking around at the space that had never really felt like mine. In that moment, I made my decision. I would not spend another night in this house. I would not give them the chance to take anything else from me. With mechanical precision, I packed a backpack with only the essentials: some clothes, my identification documents, toiletries, and the small amount of cash I kept at home. I carefully selected a few irreplaceable items: a sketchbook, a small photo of me with my friends, and a necklace given to me by Mrs. Sanderson when I graduated. As midnight approached, I sat at my desk and wrote a brief note. I cannot stay where I am, neither seen nor valued. Do not look for me. Rachel. I placed it on my perfectly made bed, took one last look around the room, and quietly descended the stairs. Our house had always been more of a shrine to Jason than a home to me, and leaving it behind felt like shedding a painful weight. The night air was cool as I slipped out the back door, carefully locking it behind me. I walked 6 blocks to the bus station, purchased a ticket with cash, and by morning I was on my way to New York City, where my high school friend Aisha had moved for college. She had always told me her couch was available if I ever needed it. Now I was taking her up on that offer, stepping into an uncertain future that, despite its challenges, could not possibly be worse than the past I was leaving behind. The first months in New York were a crash course in survival. I arrived at Aisha's small apartment in the East Village with just my backpack and a few $100s in savings. She welcomed me with open arms, but was herself struggling financially as a college student. You can stay as long as you need, she assured me, but we need to find you a job fast. I took the first positions I could find, working morning shifts at a bakery and evenings waiting tables at a diner. The schedule was grueling, often leaving me with just 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but every dollar I earned represented another step toward independence. After 2 months on Aisha's couch, I found a room in a shared apartment in Brooklyn with 3 other young women. The space was tiny, barely fitting a twin bed and small dresser, but it was mine. I cut off all contact with my family, changing my phone number and creating new email addresses. I regularly checked over my shoulder, half expecting to see my parents or Jason, though rationally I knew they were unlikely to come looking for me. My breakthrough came when Aisha introduced me to her art history professor, who had connections at a small gallery in Chelsea. My friend is incredibly talented, she told him, showing him photos of my work on her phone, and she needs a chance. The gallery owner agreed to interview me for an assistant position, and something about my determination must have impressed her. The pay isn't great, she warned, but you will learn every aspect of the art business, and you can use our space after hours to work on your own pieces. This opportunity became my lifeline. I reduced my other jobs to part-time and threw myself into learning the gallery business. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued creativity and original thinking, the very qualities my family had dismissed. I soaked up knowledge about curation-artist relations and the business side of art-building skills that would serve me well in the future. As I established financial stability, I began attending community college part-time, studying graphic design to supplement my fine art background with marketable skills. Each semester I completed felt like a personal victory, proof that I could build a future on my own terms. The psychological scars of my upbringing did not heal as quickly as my practical situation improved. I struggled with chronic insomnia, jumping at loud noises, and finding it difficult to trust new people. After a panic attack at work left me hiding in a supply closet hyperventilating, I realized I needed professional help. Finding an affordable therapist in New York seemed impossible until the gallery owner connected me with a community mental health center that offered sliding scale fees. Dr. Williams, a compassionate woman in her 50s, helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped my childhood. What you experienced was a form of family scapegoating, she explained during one session. Your brother was the golden child, and you were assigned the role of the problem child regardless of your actual behavior. It is a common dynamic in dysfunctional families, but that doesn't make it any less damaging. Learning terms like narcissistic family system and emotional neglect gave me a framework to understand my experiences. I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. The treatment I had endured was objectively harmful and would have damaged anyone subjected to it. Healing was neither quick nor linear. Some days I felt strong and forward-looking, while others found me curled in bed replaying painful memories and questioning my worth. The difference now was that I had people in my life who noticed when I was struggling and reached out instead of turning away. 3 years after my arrival in New York, I met Sam at a friend's gallery opening. Tall, with kind eyes and a quick laugh, he was a web developer with a passion for street photography. Our relationship developed slowly as I cautiously tested whether I could trust his consistent kindness. "You flinch when people raise their voices," he observed gently after we had been dating for several months. "And you apologize for things that aren't your fault. I just want you to know you are safe with me." His patience as I navigated triggers from my past helped me understand what healthy love looked like. When I finally shared the full story of my family, expecting him to question whether I was exaggerating, he instead pulled me close and said, "I am so sorry you went through that alone, but you are not alone anymore." By my 25th birthday, I had achieved milestones that once seemed impossible. I graduated with my associate degree in graphic design and landed a job at a small agency that specialized in branding for arts organizations. My work at the gallery had connected me with artists and collectors who appreciated my aesthetic, and I occasionally sold my own pieces at local art fairs. Most significantly, I signed a lease on my first solo apartment, a small studio in Greenpoint, with large windows that provided perfect natural light for painting. The day I moved in carrying my few possessions up 3 flights of stairs, I stood in the empty space and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This place was mine, earned through my own efforts, unconnected to the family that had tried to convince me I was incapable of independence. As I built my new life piece by piece, the specter of my family receded. I still had occasional nightmares about being trapped in my childhood home, but they became less frequent. I stopped expecting to see Jason around every corner. Some days passed where I didn't think about my parents at all, a freedom I once couldn't have imagined possible. 7 years had passed since I left home. My life had developed a comfortable rhythm, balanced between my graphic design career, my personal art practice, and a rich social circle that had become my chosen family. I had just been promoted to senior designer at my agency and was planning a weekend trip to celebrate with friends. Then came the email that shattered my hard-won peace. It was a Tuesday morning like any other. I was at my desk, coffee in hand, reviewing client feedback when a notification popped up on my screen. The subject line read simply, "Please read," but it was the sender that caused my coffee cup to slip from my fingers, splashing across my keyboard. Eleanor Griffin, my mother's name in my professional inbox. My body reacted before my mind could process what was happening. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and sweat beaded on my forehead. The symptoms of a panic attack I had not experienced in years came flooding back. I rushed to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and practiced the breathing exercises Dr. Williams had taught me until the worst of the physical reactions subsided. Back at my desk, I stared at the unread email. How had she found my work email? What could she possibly want after 7 years of silence? Part of me wanted to delete it unread to protect the life I had built from their toxic influence. But another part, perhaps the little girl who had once desperately wanted her parents' attention, needed to know what it said. With trembling fingers, I clicked open the message. "Rachel, I hope this message finds you well. Your father and I have respected your wish for no contact these past years, though it has been painful for us. We would not reach out now if the situation were not dire. Jason is in serious legal trouble. His investment firm is under investigation for fraud, and he has been named as a key participant in an embezzlement scheme. The legal fees are substantial, and we have put our house up as collateral for his defense. Despite this, we are still short and facing potential financial ruin. We are reaching out to ask if you might be willing to help your brother during this difficult time. Additionally, we believe this could be an opportunity for family reconciliation. Your father is not well, and it would mean so much to have all of us together again. Please consider responding. Your mother. I read the message 3 times each reading, bringing a new wave of emotion shock at the audacity, anger at the implicit assumption that I should help after everything they had done, vindication that Jason's perfect facade had finally cracked, and beneath it all, a persistent ache for the family I had never really had. I closed my laptop without responding and left work early, telling my supervisor I was feeling ill, which wasn't far from the truth. On the subway ride home, my mind raced with conflicting thoughts. 7 years of therapy had helped me understand that I owed my family nothing, yet the programming ran deep. A tiny voice whispered that maybe this was my chance to finally prove my worth to them, to be the bigger person. I called Dr. Williams from my apartment and scheduled an emergency session for that evening. "Bring the email with you," she suggested. "Let us look at it together with some emotional distance." In her quiet office, we analyzed the message line by line. "Notice how she says they respected your wish for no contact, as if your departure was a simple preference rather than a necessary escape," Dr. Williams pointed out. "And the focus is entirely on helping Jason and making your father feel better. There is no acknowledgement of the harm they caused you, no apology, not even a question about how your life has been these 7 years." Her observations helped me see through the manipulative language to the unchanged dynamic beneath. They still viewed me primarily as a resource for the family's golden child. "What do you want to do?" she asked gently. "There is no right answer here. You can respond or not respond. You can offer help with conditions or boundaries or decline entirely. The choice is yours, and whatever you decide does not define your worth as a person." That night, I called my best friend Aisha, who had been with me from the beginning of my journey. "The nerve of these people," she fumed after I read her the email. 7 years of silence and then, "Hey, we need money for Jason." Absolutely not. Her protective anger was comforting, but I needed to process my own feelings. Before making any decisions, I decided to verify the situation. A quick internet search confirmed that Jason's firm was indeed under federal investigation for a multi-million-dollar investment scheme with several executives, including a Jason Griffin, facing potential charges. Seeing his name in the news articles brought a complex mix of emotions. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction that his charmed life had finally encountered consequences. Another part remembered the little boy who had once built blanket forts with me before our family's dysfunction, twisted him into someone unrecognizable. Over the next few days, I drafted and deleted dozens of potential responses. The hardest part was fighting the ingrained desire to please them, to be the good, helpful daughter I had always tried to be despite their rejection. But I kept returning to a central truth: they were still primarily concerned with saving Jason, not reconnecting with me for my own sake. After a week of reflection, including another session with Dr. Williams and long conversations with Sam, I composed a response that maintained my boundaries while acknowledging receipt of their message. "Eleanor and Thomas, I have received your email regarding Jason's legal troubles. I will not be providing financial assistance for his defense. The choices that led to this situation were his to make, just as my choice to build a separate life was mine. I wish you well in resolving these difficulties, but I cannot and will not re-enter a family dynamic that caused me significant harm. Please do not contact me again at this email address, as it is my professional contact. Rachel." I read it over several times, making sure it contained no unnecessary emotion or justification, then pressed send before I could second-guess myself. Then I blocked their email address and contacted IT at my company to implement additional filtering for any messages from their domain. That night, I cried for hours in Sam's arms, releasing years of pent-up grief for the family I had needed but never had. The contact had reopened wounds I thought had healed, but at least now I knew I could face them directly, rather than running from the pain. In the days following my response to my parents, I experienced a maelstrom of emotions. The careful balance I had constructed in my life felt temporarily destabilized, as if a ghost from the past had walked through walls I thought impenetrable. Despite blocking their work email, I received follow-up messages at my personal account, which I had forgotten was still active from before I left home. These messages followed predictable patterns of manipulation. My mother pleaded about family obligation, and my father made veiled references to my abandonment of them in their time of need. One particularly troubling email included the line, "After everything we sacrificed to raise you, this is how you repay us." The irony of them claiming sacrifices while they had systematically prioritized Jason at every turn was not lost on me. I did not respond to any of these messages, but I brought them to my next therapy session, where Dr. Williams helped me process the renewed feelings of guilt and inadequacy they triggered. "These are your old wounds speaking," she reminded me. "Your parents installed these emotional buttons in you from childhood, and they know exactly how to push them. But you get to decide whether those buttons still control your responses." The work we did in these sessions was some of the most challenging of my recovery journey. We practiced grounding techniques when memories became overwhelming and role-played conversations where I firmly maintained boundaries. Most importantly, we explored what I actually wanted from this unexpected reconnection, separate from any sense of obligation. "I think part of me always hoped they would someday recognize how they treated me was wrong," I admitted during one session. "That they would apologize and we could build some kind of new relationship. But this contact has shown me they haven't changed at all. They still see me as an extension of themselves, a resource to be used for Jason's benefit." This realization, while painful, was also clarifying. I no longer needed to hold on to hope for a reconciliation that was never going to happen on healthy terms. I could release that last thread connecting me to a fantasy of parental love and recognition that had never materialized. After several weeks of emotional processing, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would meet with my parents once in a neutral location with clear boundaries established in advance. Not to provide financial help or to rejoin the family, but to say the things I had never had the chance to say before I left. To close this chapter properly on my terms, rather than through hasty midnight escape, I arranged for Dr. Williams to be present as a neutral third party and mediator. We selected a private room at a community center midway between New York and my hometown. I prepared extensively, writing down key points I wanted to address and practicing how to respond if they attempted to dismiss or minimize my experiences. The day of the meeting arrived with a strange sense of calm. Sam drove me to the location, promising to wait outside in case I needed a quick exit. "Remember, you are not that powerless girl anymore," he said, squeezing my hand before I went inside. "You are a strong, independent woman who has built an amazing life through your own efforts." My parents arrived looking older than I remembered. My father's hair had turned completely gray, and my mother's face showed new lines of worry. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something like pity, quickly followed by the realization that their current predicament was the natural consequence of their own choices over many years. Dr. Williams facilitated introductions and reminded everyone of the ground rules we had established by email: no interrupting, no personal attacks, and either party could call for a break at any time. Then she turned to me to begin. "7 years ago, I left home because I could no longer survive in an environment where I was consistently devalued, dismissed, and treated as less important than my brother." I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. "Today, I want to tell you about the impact your parenting choices had on me, not to punish you, but because I believe in speaking truth." For the next 30 minutes, I laid out specific examples of the favoritism, gaslighting, and emotional neglect I had experienced. I described how Jason's behavior had been enabled and encouraged by their differential treatment. I explained the psychological impact of being treated as the family scapegoat and how it had affected my ability to trust and form relationships as an adult. Throughout my testimony, my parents sat in uncomfortable silence. My mother occasionally wiped away tears, while my father maintained a rigid posture, his jaw tense. When it was their turn to respond, their words confirmed what I had already suspected. "We did the best we could with two very different children," my mother began. Jason needed more support because he had such potential, and we wanted to nurture that. You were always more independent, my father added. We thought you preferred being self-sufficient. They expressed regret that I had felt neglected, but stopped short of acknowledging their actual behavior. Every statement contained a subtle shift of responsibility back to me, or a reframing that minimized their actions. Most tellingly, they quickly pivoted to Jason's current legal troubles and their financial concerns. He made some poor choices, but he was led astray by senior partners at the firm. My mother explained the familiar pattern of excusing Jason's behavior immediately apparent. He really needs family support right now. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity that nothing had fundamentally changed. They were still the same parents who had enabled destructive behavior and refused to see the damage it caused. The only difference was that the consequences had finally grown too large to completely cover up or explain away. I am not here to discuss financial assistance for Jason, I said firmly. I came to speak my truth and to let you know that I have built a good life despite the challenges of my upbringing. I have a career I love, friends who support me, and a partner who treats me with respect and kindness. I wanted you to know that I survived, that I thrived, not because of your parenting, but despite it. My father's face flushed with anger, but Dr. Williams smoothly intervened before he could respond with the dismissiveness I had come to expect. This is Rachel's time to share her experience. We agreed to listen without becoming defensive. As the session continued, it became increasingly clear that real reconciliation would not be possible without acknowledgement of the harm done, something my parents seemed constitutionally unable to provide. After 90 minutes, Dr. Williams suggested we conclude for the day. As we prepared to leave, my mother pressed a small envelope into my hand. Just think about it, she whispered. For family. I left without opening it, knowing it likely contained some appeal for financial help disguised as reconciliation. In the parking lot, I handed the unopened envelope to Sam. Throw this away for me, I requested. I do not need to see what is inside. The drive back to New York was quiet, both of us processing the intensity of the encounter. How do you feel? Sam finally asked as we crossed the bridge into Manhattan. Free, I replied after a moment of reflection. I said what needed to be said. I saw clearly that they have not changed. And I finally truly understand that their inability to love me properly was never about my worth as a person. It was about their limitations. That evening, I was welcomed home by a surprise gathering of my closest friends organized by Aisha. They had prepared my favorite foods, opened good wine, and created a space of warmth and acceptance to counterbalance the emotional weight of the day. As we sat around my small apartment sharing stories and laughter, I looked at each of their faces and recognized the family I had chosen, the people who loved me for exactly who I was, without conditions or comparisons. This was what family should feel like. I realized this sense of being truly seen and valued. The professional success I had worked so hard for continued to flourish in the months that followed. My promotion came with new creative responsibilities, and I was selected to lead a rebranding project for a prominent arts foundation. Additionally, a series of my mixed media pieces exploring themes of identity and belonging was accepted for a small solo show at a Brooklyn gallery. On opening night, surrounded by supporters who had witnessed my journey, I felt a profound sense of having come full circle. The vulnerable, devalued girl who had fled her home with only a backpack 7 years earlier had transformed into a woman of substance and achievement, creating beauty from her pain and building connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Perhaps the most meaningful development came 6 months after the meeting with my parents, when I started a support group for other adult survivors of family scapegoating. Sharing my story and helping others recognize the patterns in their own upbringings became a powerful form of healing, turning my painful experiences into a source of insight and guidance for others. The truth I have come to embrace is that forgiveness does not require reconciliation. I have forgiven my parents and Jason not for their benefit, but for my own peace of mind. This forgiveness does not mean welcoming them back into my life or providing financial support for bad decisions. It means releasing the anger that once threatened to consume me and recognizing that their treatment of me was never an accurate reflection of my value. Worth is inherent, not earned through others' validation. This is the lesson I carry forward, the truth I share with others who have walked similar paths. We are enough exactly as we are, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to walk away from those who cannot see our light in order to find those who will help it shine even brighter. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family obligation and self-preservation? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more authentic conversations about healing and growth. And remember, sharing these stories helps others feel less alone, so consider passing this along to someone who might need to hear that it is okay to choose themselves. Thank you for being here with me today, and I wish you strength on your own journey toward wholeness.